Hello, story lovers. Tonight, we're diving into a tale of passion, secrets, and choices that could change everything. Hearts will be broken, love will be tested, and every twist will leave you on the edge of your seat. Comment below where you're watching from. And if this story moves you, hit like, subscribe, share it with someone who loves a powerful love story, and tap the bell so you never miss the next thrilling chapter. Ready? Let's begin. Asterisk. The champagne glass slipped from Natalya's fingers, crystal exploding against marble like her carefully constructed composure. Jonathan's laughter echoed through the Meridian Hotel ballroom as designer heels clicked away from the spreading puddle at her feet. Such grace, Camille whispered loud enough for half the room to hear. No wonder she lost everything. The October rain hammered against floor-to-ceiling windows. Drop a percussion against Natalya's temples as she pushed through the crowd of New York's medical elite. Their faces blurred together. Former colleagues who once begged for her surgical expertise now turned away like she carried a plague. Dr. Hamilton's voice cut through the murmur. Tragic, really. Brilliant surgeon reduced to treating street kids in Brooklyn. Divorce can destroy a woman's focus. 3 months. 3 months since she'd found the divorce papers buried under Jonathan's Pharmaceutical. Patents that included her cardiac research, now worth millions in his name alone. 3 months since she'd discovered his affairs, his financial manipulations, his systematic destruction of her reputation. The ballroom's crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across her simple, black dress, last season's clearance rack special that felt like a costume in this world of couture gowns and surgical precision. She'd saved a child's life yesterday with hands steadier than any surgeon in this room. But tonight she felt like a ghost haunting her own funeral. Leaving so soon? Jonathan appeared beside her, salt and pepper hair gleaming under the lights. At 42, wealth had preserved him like expensive wine. The evening's just getting started. Natalya's fingers found the invitation in her clutch, the recognition for her pediatric cardiac research that had brought her here tonight. A lifetime of dedication reduced to a footnote while her ex-husband collected accolades for work she'd helped pioneer. I have patients to check on, she said quietly. Patients. He laughed, the sound sharp as surgical steel. Those charity cases in Brooklyn? How noble. Playing savior to people who can't afford real doctors. The crowd pressed closer, hungry for blood sport. These people had once sought her recommendations, valued her opinions, treated her as an equal. Now they watched her humiliation with the detached interest of observers at an execution. At least I'm still practicing medicine, she said, voice steady despite the rage building in her chest. Instead of profiting from other people's discoveries, Jonathan's smile faltered for exactly 1 heartbeat before reforming, sharper than before. Careful, Natalya. Bitterness isn't attractive on you. Through the windows, lightning split the sky like a surgeon's scalpel. In that brief illumination, Natalya saw something that made her blood freeze, a figure standing alone on the hotel's terrace, drenched in rain yet utterly still. Dark hair plastered to his skull, expensive suit ruined by the storm. He watched the scene inside with the intensity of a predator studying prey. Their eyes met through the glass. She saw recognition flicker across features that belonged in Renaissance paintings' sharp cheekbones. Eyes dark as midnight surgery, a mouth that suggested both cruelty and unexpected tenderness. Who is that? She whispered, but Jonathan was already moving away, dismissing her like a servant. The stranger on the terrace smiled, slow and dangerous, before melting back into the storm. Natalya's phone buzzed. Unknown number? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Rooftop. 5 minutes. Rain lashed the Meridian's rooftop like frozen bullets, but Natalya climbed the emergency stairs anyway. Her heels echoed against concrete as she pushed through the heavy door. Emerging into the storm that had been brewing all evening, he stood silhouetted against Manhattan's glittering skyline, no longer the drenched figure from the terrace. Now his dark hair was slicked back, revealing a face that could have launched wars or toppled kingdoms. His suit was perfectly dry despite the downpour. Dr. Natalya Reeves. His voice carried a slight accent she couldn't play, European, educated, dangerous. The woman who pioneered the Mitchell cardiac technique before her husband stole credit? Who are you? Someone who appreciates talent when he sees it. He stepped closer, rain seeming to avoid him entirely. Someone who despises thieves, lightning illuminated his features properly for the first time. Late 30s, with the kind of bone structure that suggested generations of careful breeding. His eyes held depths that spoke of violence carefully contained, power held in check by will alone. You sent the text. I sent the invitation. He produced the cream. Envelope from his jacket identical to the one that had brought her here tonight. The Medical Foundation thinks they nominated your research. I made sure they did. Natalya's breath caught. Why? Because Jonathan Blake destroyed something precious when he destroyed you. And I have a particular hatred for men who break beautiful things. His smile was winter-made flesh. Allow me to introduce myself properly. Alexander Konstantin Volkov. The name hit like a physical blow. She'd heard whispers in medical circles, the mysterious benefactor behind several European medical research facilities. A man whose pharmaceutical investments could make or break entire hospital systems. Rumored to be connected to old Russian nobility, though no one knew for certain. The Volkov Foundation, she whispered. You fund half the cardiac research in Eastern Europe. Among other ventures, rain drummed against the rooftop garden's glass panels, creating a percussion that matched her racing heartbeat. I was there tonight to evaluate an investment in your ex-husband's company. Instead, I watched a master craftsman humiliate the artist whose work he'd stolen. And you care because... Alexander moved closer. Close enough that she could smell expensive cologne mixed with something darker gunpowder. Perhaps, or old money and older violence. Because 12 years ago, a brilliant young surgeon in Prague saved my nephew's life. Revolutionary technique, they said. The Mitchell method. Performed by a rising star named Dr. Natalya Chen before she married and took her husband's name. The memory hit like vertigo. A 7-year-old boy, born with a heart defect that should have been fatal. She'd been consulting at Charles University Hospital, developing the procedure that would later bear her mentor's name. The child's uncle had never come forward, had never thanked her directly. Victor, she breathed. Little Victor with the ventricular septal defect. My sister's son. He's 19 now, studying medicine at Oxford. Because of you, Alexander's hand found her chin, tilting her face up to meet his gaze. Jonathan Blake is about to announce a new cardiac drug based on your research. Research he stole. Research he claimed. It will make him $50 million in the first year alone. I know. I helped develop the preliminary studies during our marriage. What if I told you there was another way? His thumb traced her jawline with surgical precision. What if instead of watching him profit from your brilliance, you could take everything he values? I'm not interested in revenge. No. Lightning flashed, and in its light his smile turned predatory. Then why did you come up here in the rain to meet a stranger? Thunder crashed overhead, and Natalya realized he was right. She had come seeking something: justice, vindication, or perhaps just the promise that someone still saw her worth. What exactly are you proposing? Alexander's laugh was silk over steel. A partnership. You provide the medical expertise. I provide the resources. Together, we build something that makes Jonathan's little pharmaceutical company look like a child's lemonade stand. And what do you get out of it? The satisfaction of watching a thief burn. His eyes held hers with hypnotic intensity. And perhaps the pleasure of working closely with the most brilliant cardiac surgeon of her generation. Rain soaked through her dress as she considered his offer. Below them, the gala continued, Jonathan accepting congratulations. Camille holding court. The medical elite celebrating their own success while the woman who'd advanced their field stood forgotten on a rooftop. There's something else, Alexander said quietly. Something you should know before you decide. What? Jonathan's new cardiac drug. The one he's announcing tonight? His smile turned sharp as broken glass. It has a fatal flaw in the dosage calculations. People will die if it goes to market. Natalya's blood turned to ice. That's impossible. I checked those calculations myself. You checked the preliminary research. But Jonathan modified the formula to cut costs, changed the binding agent to increase profit margins. He doesn't know yet, but his own greed has created a poison pill. How do you know this? Alexander's expression grew distant, dangerous, because 3 months ago, my sister started showing symptoms of cardiac arrhythmia. The doctors prescribed an experimental medication. She died last week. The rooftop fell silent except for rain and distant thunder. Victor lost his mother to your ex-husband's negligence, Alexander continued, voice deadly calm. Just as he almost lost his life before you saved it. This isn't just about justice anymore, Dr. Reeves. It's about preventing a massacre. Natalya stared at him. Seeing now the grief hidden behind his composed facade, the fury banked like coals behind his dark eyes. This wasn't about business or revenge. It was about family. It's about the boy she'd saved who'd now lost his mother to the man who'd destroyed her life. If what you're saying is true, she said slowly, then we need to stop him before people die. Does that mean you accept my proposal? Lightning split the sky again, illuminating them both in stark relief against the storm. When Natalya spoke, her voice carried the steel she'd learned from years in surgery, where precision could mean the difference between life and death. It means Jonathan Blake is about to learn what happens when you betray. Someone who holds people's hearts in her hands. Alexander's smile was beautiful and terrible. Welcome to the war, Dr. Reeves. As if summoned by their words. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop asking questions about the cardiac formula, or your little clinic will lose its funding permanently. Some doors should stay closed. JB. Hello, story lovers. Tonight, we're diving into a tale of passion, secrets, and choices that could change everything. Hearts will be broken, love will be tested, and every twist will leave you on the edge of your seat. Comment below where you're watching from. And if this story moves you, hit like, subscribe, share it with someone who loves a powerful love story, and tap the bell so you never miss the next thrilling chapter. Ready? Let's begin. Asterisk. The champagne glass slipped from Natalya's fingers, crystal exploding against marble like her carefully constructed composure. Jonathan's laughter echoed through the Meridian Hotel ballroom as designer heels clicked away from the spreading puddle at her feet. Such grace, Camille whispered loud enough for half the room to hear. No wonder she lost everything. The October rain hammered against floor-to-ceiling windows. Drop a percussion against Natalya's temples as she pushed through the crowd of New York's medical elite. Their faces blurred together. Former colleagues who once begged for her surgical expertise now turned away like she carried a plague. Dr. Hamilton's voice cut through the murmur. Tragic, really. Brilliant surgeon reduced to treating street kids in Brooklyn. Divorce can destroy a woman's focus. 3 months. 3 months since she'd found the divorce papers buried under Jonathan's Pharmaceutical. Patents that included her cardiac research, now worth millions in his name alone. 3 months since she'd discovered his affairs, his financial manipulations, his systematic destruction of her reputation. The ballroom's crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across her simple, black dress, last season's clearance rack special that felt like a costume in this world of couture gowns and surgical precision. She'd saved a child's life yesterday with hands steadier than any surgeon in this room. But tonight she felt like a ghost haunting her own funeral. Leaving so soon? Jonathan appeared beside her, salt and pepper hair gleaming under the lights. At 42, wealth had preserved him like expensive wine. The evening's just getting started. Natalya's fingers found the invitation in her clutch, the recognition for her pediatric cardiac research that had brought her here tonight. A lifetime of dedication reduced to a footnote while her ex-husband collected accolades for work she'd helped pioneer. I have patients to check on, she said quietly. Patients. He laughed, the sound sharp as surgical steel. Those charity cases in Brooklyn? How noble. Playing savior to people who can't afford real doctors. The crowd pressed closer, hungry for blood sport. These people had once sought her recommendations, valued her opinions, treated her as an equal. Now they watched her humiliation with the detached interest of observers at an execution. At least I'm still practicing medicine, she said, voice steady despite the rage building in her chest. Instead of profiting from other people's discoveries, Jonathan's smile faltered for exactly one heartbeat before reforming, sharper than before. Careful, Natalya. Bitterness isn't attractive on you. Through the windows, lightning split the sky like a surgeon's scalpel. In that brief illumination, Natalya saw something that made her blood freeze, a figure standing alone on the hotel's terrace, drenched in rain yet utterly still. Dark hair plastered to his skull, expensive suit ruined by the storm. He watched the scene inside with the intensity of a predator studying prey. Their eyes met through the glass. She saw recognition flicker across features that belonged in Renaissance paintings' sharp cheekbones. Eyes dark as midnight surgery, a mouth that suggested both cruelty and unexpected tenderness. "Who is that?" she whispered, but Jonathan was already moving away, dismissing her like a servant. The stranger on the terrace smiled, slow and dangerous, before melting back into the storm. Natalya's phone buzzed. "Unknown number? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Rooftop. 5 minutes." Victor's monitor beeps echoed through Brooklyn General's eye. See you like a metronome counting down to disaster. At 19, he should have been invincible, all sharp cheekbones and restless energy inherited from his uncle. Instead, he lay pale as winter snow. Cardiac rhythms erratic as storm-tossed waves. His enzyme levels are off the charts, Dr. Martinez reported, clipboard trembling in her hands. Whatever this Cardiomax 7 is doing to his heart, it's happening fast. Natalya studied the readouts with surgical focus, but her hands shook as she traced the deteriorating patterns. This was the boy she'd saved 12 years ago, the child whose life had sparked her partnership with Alexander. Now that same heart was failing because of her ex-husband's greed. Can you reverse it? Alexander stood rigid beside the bed, his usual composed demeanor shattered. He hadn't let go of Victor's hand since they'd arrived 2 hours ago. "I can try." Natalya moved to the medication chart, calculating dosages with the precision that had once made her Manhattan's most sought-after cardiac surgeon. "But I need to know exactly what was in that trial medication. The formula they gave him might be different from what we analyzed." Alexander's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and went deadly still. "What?" Natalya asked. "Jonathan's launch party is starting. My contact says he's moved up the presentation by 2 hours. Alexander showed her the text. "He knows we're onto him? Then we expose him now. Call the FDA, the medical board. Every journalist you know. It won't matter if Victor dies tonight." Alexander's voice broke on the last word. "I failed my sister. I can't fail him too." Natalya made a decision that would haunt her forever. "Go to the party." "What?" "Jonathan's there with samples of the real formula, the one they're giving to trial patients. Give me a sample, and I can synthesize a proper antidote." She was already moving toward the supply cabinet, gathering materials for procedures she'd only read about in theoretical journals. "I'll stay here and keep Victor stable. I won't leave him. You have to." She grabbed his shoulders, forcing him to meet her eyes. "This is bigger than Victor now. Jonathan has trial patients across the city taking this poison. We need that formula, or people will die. Come with me. I'm a surgeon, not a spy. My job is saving lives, not playing games with pharmaceutical executives." She kissed his forehead. "Benediction and goodbye. Besides, you're the one with royal connections and infinite resources. I'm just a doctor from Brooklyn." Alexander stared at her for a long moment. She saw him memorizing her face like he'd never see it again. When this is over, we'll figure out what comes next." But even as she spoke, Natalya felt the weight of inevitability settling around them. Some partnerships were forged in crisis and shattered by consequence. Some alliances only survived as long as they had a common enemy. After Alexander left, she threw herself into medical calculations with desperate focus. Victor's condition was deteriorating rapidly, cardiac tissue damage, spreading like wildfire through ventricles that had once been repaired by her own hands. Every few minutes, alarms would sound as his rhythm flatlined. forcing her to shock him back to consciousness with electrical paddles that left burn marks on his chest. "Dr. Reeves?" Nurse Martinez appeared at her elbow. "There's someone here to see you." Camille Blake stood in the doorway like a designer nightmare, her golden hair perfect despite the late hour, her smile sharp as surgical steel. She wore a cocktail dress that probably cost more than the ICU's monthly budget, diamonds glittering at her throat like captured stars. "Hello, Natalya. I thought you might want to know how. Alexander's evening is going. Get out." Natalya didn't look up from Victor's monitors. "This is a hospital, not a social club." "Oh, but I think you'll find this quite social indeed." Camille produced her phone, displaying a live video feed from the Meridian Hotel's ballroom. Alexander arrived about an hour ago. Quite the entrance he made, on the tiny screen. Natalya could see Alexander in perfect focus, standing beside Jonathan at the presentation podium. He wore the same tuxedo from 6 weeks ago, looked every inch the wealthy investor he claimed to be. But something was wrong with the picture. Volume up. Camille tapped the screen, and Alexander's voice filled the ICU with crystal clarity. "Delighted to announce my partnership with Blake Pharmaceuticals in bringing CardioMax 7 to market. Dr. Blake's innovative research will save thousands of lives." Natalya's world tilted sideways. "That's impossible, is it? Did you really think someone like Alexander Volkov would align himself with a disgraced surgeon from Brooklyn?" Camille's laugh was musical and cruel. "Men like him don't have partners, darling. They have assets." On screen, Jonathan shook Alexander's hand while cameras flashed like strobe lights. The two men stood together, united in purpose. While investors applauded their collaboration, you see, Natalya? Alexander needed someone with medical expertise to help him perfect Jonathan's formula. Not to destroy it, to improve it. Remove the fatal flaws. Increase the profit margins. Expand the market potential. Camille settled into a chair like she owned the hospital. "Your research, your late nights, your desperate desire for revenge, all of it was data collection for their real partnership. You're lying. Am I?" Camille showed her another video, this one from weeks ago. Alexander and Jonathan, in what looked like a private office, shaking hands over documents that bore Volkov Industries' letterhead. This was taken the day after you met Alexander on the rooftop. He'd already been negotiating with Jonathan for months. The ICU monitors screamed as Victor's heart rate spiked. But Natalya barely heard them through the roaring in her ears. Everything made sense now. Alexander's convenient timing, his detailed knowledge of Jonathan's business, his ability to arrange the gala invitation. He'd been playing both sides from the beginning. "The boy's dying," Camille observed clinically. "Quite sad, really. Alexander's own nephew sacrificed for business interests. Though I suppose that's rather fitting. He did the same thing to you. Why are you telling me this?" "Because Jonathan wants you to know that you never had a chance. That every moment you thought you were winning, you were actually losing." Camille stood, smoothing her dress with practiced elegance. "Also because he has an offer I'm not interested? Oh, but you are. You see, Jonathan developed an antidote for CardioMax 7 months ago. A simple compound that reverses the cardiac damage completely. 1 dose, and the boy lives." Camille produced a small vial filled with clear liquid. "All you have to do is sign a confession." "What kind of confession?" "That you developed the flawed cardiac formula out of spite after your divorce. That you deliberately sabotaged Jonathan's research to damage his company. That Alexander Volkov is innocent of any wrongdoing, merely a victim of your deception." Camille set the vial on Victor's bedside table, close enough to touch. "Sign the papers, and the antidote is yours. Refuse, and watch Alexander's nephew die, knowing you could have saved him." Natalya stared at the confession documents, her hands shaking as she read terms that would destroy her career forever, brand her as a criminal, ensure she'll never practice medicine again. But Victor's monitors showed a heart rhythm growing weaker by the minute, and the antidote sat inches away like salvation in a bottle. "How long do I have to decide?" "Oh, darling," Camille smiled with poisonous sweetness. "You don't, you see. Alexander is about to discover that his beloved nephew is dying. He'll rush here immediately, probably arriving just as the boy flatlines. Imagine his grief when he realizes his partner in revenge let his family member die out of petty vindictiveness. The trap was perfect in its cruelty. Sign the confession and destroy herself to save Victor, or let him die and destroy any chance of exposing Jonathan's crimes. Either way, she lost everything: her reputation, her alliance with Alexander, her hope of justice. But as Camille headed for the door, Natalya made a third choice that neither of them had anticipated. She grabbed the antidote and injected it directly into Victor's IV line. The monitors immediately began showing improved heart rhythms, stronger pulse, stabilizing blood pressure. Victor's eyes fluttered open, focusing on her face with the grateful recognition of a patient whose life had been saved twice by the same surgeon. "Thank you," he whispered in Russian-accented English. Natalya smiled and squeezed his hand, then turned to face Camille's shocked expression. "You can't have done that without signing the confession?" Camille sputtered. The deal was between you and someone who plays by rules." Natalya moved toward the medical cabinet, retrieving supplies for procedures that would make Victor's recovery complete. "I'm a surgeon. I don't make deals with people's lives. Jonathan will destroy you for this. Let him try." Natalya began preparing a cardiac stabilization compound that would ensure Victor suffered no lasting damage. But first, we'll have to explain to the FBI why he had an antidote for a drug that was supposedly safe. Camille's face went white as she realized the implications. By offering the antidote, she'd confirmed that Jonathan knew his formula was lethal. By bringing it to the hospital, she'd provided evidence of premeditated murder. "You've just confessed to conspiracy to commit mass murder?" Natalya continued calmly. "I'd recommend you call a lawyer." As Camille fled the ICU, Natalya turned her attention back to Victor, whose color was already returning to normal. The monitors showed a strong, steady heartbeat, the same rhythm she'd helped establish 12 years ago in Prague. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. "On my way. Is he alive?" She stared at the message, knowing that everything would change when he arrived. The partnership was over, built as it was on deception and manipulation. The trust was shattered, destroyed by his betrayal and her retaliation, but the boy would live. And Jonathan's crimes would be exposed, and sometimes that had to be enough. She typed back, "He's alive, but we need to talk." Alexander arrived like winter incarnate, his tuxedo wrinkled and torn, blood on his knuckles from what looked like recently broken glass. He moved through Brooklyn General's corridors with predatory grace, nurses and orderlies instinctively stepping aside as he passed. Victor was sleeping peacefully when his uncle entered the ICU, monitors showing the strong cardiac rhythms of a 19-year-old who would live to see 20. Alexander stopped beside the bed, his composure finally cracking as he touched his nephew's forehead with infinite gentleness. He asked without looking at Natalya. "Camille brought an antidote. I used it. Camille Blake was here." His voice carried lethal quiet. "She came to gloat. To show me video of your partnership with Jonathan? To watch me break when I realized I'd been played from the beginning?" Natalya stood on the opposite side of the bed, Victor's sleeping form between them like a bridge across burning ground. "She offered me a deal: Victor's life in exchange for a signed confession, destroying my reputation, in clearing your name, and you chose to save him. Anyway, I chose to be a doctor." Alexander was silent for a long moment, studying his nephew's peaceful features. "The videos Camille showed you were real. Jonathan and I have been negotiating a partnership for months." The admission hit like a physical blow, even though she'd known it was coming. Why? Because infiltrating his organization was the only way to gather evidence of his crimes. Because I needed him to trust me enough to show me the real formula, the real trial data, the real scope of his murderous negligence. Alexander finally looked at her across the bed. Because sometimes the only way to destroy a monster is to become one yourself. You used me. I used your expertise. I used your knowledge of Jonathan's psychology. I used your desire for justice. His dark eyes held hers with uncomfortable intensity. But I never lied to you about what we were fighting for. You let me think we were partners. We were partners. We are partners. He moved around the bed, closing the distance between them with careful steps. Everything I told you about my sister's death was true. Everything about Victor's medical history was true. Jonathan Blake is still a murderer, and his drug is still killing people. Then why the charade with the launch party? Why the public partnership? Alexander smiled, and for the first time since she'd known him, it held genuine warmth instead of calculated charm. Because I needed Jonathan to believe he'd won. To celebrate his victory so completely that he'd reveal the full scope of his operation to his new business partner. He produced his phone, showing her a recording app that had been running for hours. Every word of tonight's conversation is documented. Jonathan confessing to unauthorized human trials, to bribing FDA officials, to covering up patient deaths across 3 states. He even bragged about stealing your cardiac research, claiming it as his own intellectual property. Natalya stared at the phone. Then at Alexander's face, seeing now the exhaustion hidden behind his controlled facade. You've been recording him all night. For 6 weeks. Every meeting, every phone call, every moment he thought he could trust his new Russian partner. Alexander sat heavily in the chair beside Victor's bed, suddenly looking older than his 38 years. I have enough evidence to destroy him 10 times over, but you needed him to believe you'd betrayed me. I needed him to believe he was untouchable, that his new partnership protected him from any consequences. Alexander's hands shook slightly as he reached for Victor's wrist, checking his pulse with the desperate care of someone who'd already lost too much family. I couldn't risk him discovering our real plan and fleeing the country with his stolen research. So you let me think you'd betrayed me? Let me believe I was alone. I thought you would trust me. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I thought 6 weeks of working together, of seeing each other at our most vulnerable, would be enough for you to know that I would never abandon you. The words hung between them like a challenge and an apology. Victor stirred in his sleep, murmuring something in Russian that made Alexander's expression soften with protective love. What happens now? Natalya asked. Now, the FBI raids Blake Pharmaceuticals with enough evidence to put Jonathan away for life. His assets are frozen, his research confiscated. His victims finally get justice. Alexander stood, moving to the window that overlooked Brooklyn's sleeping streets. Camille will probably get immunity in exchange for testimony. But her reputation in New York society is finished. And us. Alexander was quiet for so long that Natalya thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his reflection in the window looked like a ghost of the man she'd fallen in love with. There is no us. There never could be. He turned to face her, and she saw the truth written in every line of his face. I'm not who you think I am, Natalya. The Volkov fortune comes from sources that would horrify you. My connections span governments and criminal organizations that don't distinguish between them. The resources I used to help you, they came with prices paid in blood. I don't care about your family's history, you should. He moved closer, close enough that she could see the old scars on his hands, marks that spoke of violence survived and violence committed. Victor's father was murdered by business rivals when the boy was 7. My sister died not from Jonathan's negligence, but because she refused to help launder money through her medical research foundation. I am not a philanthropist, Natalya. I am not one of the good ones. The admission should have terrified her. Instead, she found herself thinking of all the nights they'd worked together, of the way his hands had trembled when Victor was dying, of the grief he carried for a sister who'd chosen integrity over safety. What are you saying? I'm saying that you deserve better than a partner whose love comes with bodyguards and blood money. You deserve better than looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life, wondering which of my enemies might target you to get to me. Alexander's voice broke on the last words. You deserve the chance to practice medicine without wondering if your patients are safe from the violence that follows me. Everywhere I go, that's not your choice to make. It's the only choice I can. Mickey pulled an envelope from his jacket, thick with legal documents. Your medical license has been fully restored. Presbyterian Hospital is offering you chief of cardiac surgery with a salary 3 times what Jonathan was paying you. Your research patents have been returned to your name. All profits from Jonathan's theft redirected to your accounts. Natalya took the envelope with hands that shook. You bought my freedom. I gave you back what was always yours. Alexander moved to Victor's bedside, brushing a strand of dark hair from his nephew's forehead with infinite tenderness. He's going to study medicine at Columbia now instead of Oxford. Close enough that I can protect him. Far enough that he can build a life without my shadows, Alexander. There. One more thing. He produced a small device from his pocket, the same recording equipment he'd used on Jonathan. Everything we've said tonight, everything we've planned and felt and promised, it's all been recorded, not for evidence. For memory, he set the recorder on Victor's bedside table, between the monitors that showed a strong heartbeat and the flowers that spoke of survival against impossible odds. Someday, when the danger has passed and the debts are paid, when Victor is old enough to understand the choices adults make for love someday, I'll listen to this recording and remember the 6 weeks when I was the man you thought I could be. Alexander moved toward the door, but Natalya's voice stopped him. The night we met on the rooftop. You said some environments are too toxic to survive in. He turned, his hand on the doorframe like an anchor. I was wrong, she continued. Some environments don't destroy you. They reveal who you really are underneath everything else. She gestured to Victor, sleeping peacefully between machines that showed his complete recovery. You spent months infiltrating a murderer's organization to save lives. You risked everything to protect your nephew. You gave up the woman you loved to keep her safe. Natalya, you're not the man you think you are. Alexander Konstantin Volkov. Her voice carried the authority she'd learned from years of holding people's hearts in her hands. You're better. He stared at her for a long moment, memorizing her face the way he had that first night in the rain. When he spoke, his voice held the weight of promises and possibilities. In 2 years, when Jonathan is in prison and his organization is destroyed, when the trials are over and the victims have justice in 2 years, there's a small cardiac research facility in Prague. They need a director, someone brilliant enough to revolutionize pediatric surgery, someone brave enough to take on cases other doctors won't touch. And the current director is waiting to see if the most remarkable surgeon he's ever known might consider a partnership with a reformed criminal who spent 2 years learning to deserve her. Alexander left without another word, his footsteps echoing down the corridor like a countdown to tomorrow. Natalya watched him go, knowing that some goodbyes were really promises. Some endings were actually beginnings. Victor stirred, his eyes opening to focus on her face with the clarity of someone whose life had been saved twice by the same hands. Aunt Natalya, he whispered in accented English. She smiled, squeezing his hand with the gentle strength of someone who held hearts for a living. Rest now. Everything is going to be all right. Outside, dawn was breaking over Brooklyn, painting the sky in shades of hope and possibility. Somewhere in Manhattan, FBI agents were preparing to arrest a pharmaceutical executive whose empire was built on stolen dreams and murdered patients. Somewhere in the distance, a man with royal blood and criminal connections was walking toward a future where he might learn to become worthy of the woman who'd seen his soul behind the shadows, and in a small, I see your room where miracles happen daily. A surgeon who'd lost everything and found it again watched over a sleeping boy whose heartbeat was steady as promises, strong as love, reliable as justice finally served. 2 years was both forever and no time at all. Some partnerships are worth waiting for. The end.